All right, it's 7:05, and we're going to call the meeting of the Equity and Inclusion meeting to order. Attendance, Jess, can you do that? Or, great.
Yvonne Salinas,
Here.
Bess Bailey,
Here.
Tara Adler,
Here.
Gabriela Flores,
Present.
Daniel Trotter,
Here.
Brandy Alexander, and April Jones. And Jess Loya here.
Next up is community comments. Or any phone calls or emails we need to discuss from the community.
I forwarded the messages that were sent. I just want to make sure everybody got those, correct? Okay. And I was able to respond as the EIC.
Moving on to approval of strategic plan. It's in the agenda, and I emailed that out as well. Why don't we take 3 minutes and read through the strategic plan draft that we have? It should be draft number 4 or attached. Does anyone need more time? Great. All in favor to approve the current draft of the strategic plan? Jess, do you want to do a roll vote?
Yvonne Salinas,
Yes.
Bess Bailey,
Yes.
Tara Adler,
Yes.
Gabriela Flores,
Yes.
Daniel Trotter,
Yes.
Jessica Loya, yes. Passes. 7-7.
Great. We're moving quick tonight. I'm feeling really good about this. The next thing we have on our agenda is the discussion of the budget. I know one of the things we talked about doing with the 2021 budget would be paying for some of the NKC United decals, so I'm wondering if you'd just move up voting on decals. Okay, great. There are, if everyone has the agenda open and you scroll down to the different drafts, there are 10 of them. That being said, I'm not sure the best way to number this, but if you look at it, it's like NKC United with a blue background. So we'll just go 1 and then across to the purple background 2, white background 3, blue background 4, and kind of follow that number pattern. It's in the agenda. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I sent it out with our working agenda and minute plan tonight. Do you want me to forward it to you? Okay. Oh. Okay. Does anyone have a proposal for how we vote for these, other than now we have them numbered 1 through 10?
Should we vote based on each design concept and then narrow down by color, do a two-part vote potentially?
I think sounds great. Okay, so
Lisa, did you have?
I just wanted to add, we discussed this just before the meeting, but we did get feedback from a citizen that had come to a couple of the meetings that emailed the EIC. It was a while ago, so I was just going to remind everybody. His suggestion was that change begins here doesn't tell people exactly what it is, and he suggested all are welcome. If you look at the design on the front page, it has change begins here at the top and at the bottom. We could still approve one of these with the amendment that, with the change of saying all are welcome at the top and change begins here at the bottom, or however you would want to do it. When we do finalize which one we vote for, we can say with this exception. Okay.
great. So let's go ahead and go for shape of the logo, either square or circle. And then we'll go for color palette. Jess, however you want to handle this voting, I have confidence.
I mean, I feel like we can just go down the line and say our preference on shape, starting with Yvonne and working this way.
There are two different versions of the circle, though. So,
Yeah, that was also my question on the second circles.
I think you'd have to make a decision as to whether or not you wanted to change that, I guess. Although, like you said, if you did a vote on circle versus square, if you end up being circle, then wouldn't do that. No, you guys haven't voted on it yet.
Well, we can't add all are welcome on the square one, so that one's out.
I
We
mean-
could replace change begins here with all are welcome.
Yeah.
Or you could leave it as is. It's still up to you guys.
Yeah, I personally appreciated the feedback just for all are welcome, because I think it makes a little more sense to just a bystander seeing that on a decal that is on a door or a storefront, whatever it might be. I think it, brings them towards the goals of that NKC United program. Just, yeah.
I agree with that, yep. And I guess with the squares, if we wanted to have both, could we not just add a border with the wording, just the same as we did with any of the circles?
Yeah, I think that would be pretty easy.
So it sounds like we can still make the edits to the squares that would include a border that said all are welcome, or flip-flopping change begin here around and then all are welcome inside. So I think we're still down to which shape do you prefer, circle or square?
So I got my computer issues worked out. I can do the roll call if you want me to. So the question is, square or circle?
Starting with Yvonne.
Starting with Yvonne.
Okay.
Bess?
Circle.
Tara?
circle.
Gabby?
I think I like square.
Daniel?
I like the square.
I like the circle just because circles genuinely are unity, and I just like the representation of the circle better,
Okay, so we are tied at 3-3.
which I believe makes you the tiebreaker
Oh, I don't want to.
based on the bylaws.
I thought it was an arm wrestle.
Oh, or like it might have been a coin flip. I don't have a coin, but
Oh, was it a coin?
it might have been a coin flip. I'm pretty sure we did a coin flip so that, because she has no voting power.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, because I usually do rock, paper, scissors at home, but.
You are, oh, I don't think we specified that. You are the flipper, I believe.
So wouldn't we pick heads, square,
Oh, yeah.
tails, circle?
Oh, gosh.
So,
I really,
Great. So the shape we have flipped our coin on is for the square logo. We have two options with the blue lettering, white background, or white lettering, blue background. And I'm just referring to the North Kansas City letters at the top.
I have a question. So in the middle section, the two on the left are, and the one, I guess, above that in the top section, aren't those, what are those in line with? That's like something city related, the color scheme.
Yeah, the color scheme are the official colors for city signs, anything that they produce.
All of them, or just those three specifically?
Well, Kim created these, so I think, she sent me a sheet. They've got like a main color, sub-colors, and then like sub-colors, so I'm sure they're all in line.
Okay.
She created them herself, so.
I think they just use the colors differently.
Yeah, those colors just specifically stand out to me as recognizable for some reason as part of something versus all the other colors.
So are you saying the blue background is what you're saying, or?
Oh, yeah, but we're starting with Yvonne on a vote. I was just wondering. I just
No,
had
no,
a
no, I
question.
just didn't know if that's what you were discussing even.
Yeah, no, well, so the three with the green borders, those all just are like weirdly striking, as in they're used somewhere else that is recognizable to me, versus all of the other which I don't recognize any of those as being a part of anything NKC, if that makes sense. It might even be the newsletter or something like that, but those colors are
Yeah.
recognizable.
You'll see the colors even in the signs that were for music in the park. They have signs for those all over, like by the dog park. They're all going to be in the same colors. So, are you ready for me to take the vote? The question is, do you like the white background or the blue background? Yvonne?
blue.
Bess?
Blue.
Tara?
White.
Gabby?
blue.
Danielle?
Blue.
And Jess?
I like the white, but only if we're doing the border around it that says all are welcome.
Okay, so 4-2, blue background.
Can I ask a clarifying question? We had said that we would make an edit to number 10, right? To include all are welcome, to modify it. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
Okay.
you guys will need to decide if you want a border around this, much as the circles have a border with the words in it, or if you would like to change the words, change begins here to all are welcome.
So I would propose if we are going to add a border, we should change the words from change begins here to all are welcome, because it's just like right off the bat visible. And kind of to what Daniel was saying about like recognizing it. And then if we are going to add a border, I guess add the change begins here in the border somewhere.
Does anyone else have another proposition?
I say just put all are welcome instead of change begins here.
No border?
No border.
Anything else?
All agree?
Nope, we have two different things.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we do
So let
have
me get
two
this
different
typed
things.
down before I put numbers.
I was just suggesting, I'm good with the changing of wording.
Okay, so your two choices are to leave it as is, but change the words to all are welcome, Option 2 is to add a border, put all are welcome where change begins here currently is, and put change begins here in the border around the square. Those are the two options. Are there any questions before I take roll? Nope. Okay. Yvonne?
I picked the one that changes, all are welcome. No border.
Bess?
All are welcome, no border.
Tara?
All are welcome, no border.
Gabby?
Ooh, tricky. I'm going to vote for border.
Daniel?
I would say all are welcome without the border.
Jess?
I'm going to go all are welcome without the border.
Okay, so all are welcome, changing the words, change begins here, with all are welcome, with no border. So the only change is, change begins here, will be all are welcome.
Great, thanks. Moving back to number 5 for the budget. Biggest thing we had for what to do with money for our 2021 budget, which ends September 30th. So we've got a little over a month there. One thing that we mentioned needing to do at our last meeting was make sure that we reimburse Lisa for any of the North Kansas City, people of North Kansas City gift cards. Are there any other items that we need to reimburse?
Reimburse, no. We had talked about allocating part of the budget for purchasing materials once we get our logo. So we can earmark that, spend the money, we can get the signs and use the money for that now,
Yes.
right? Yes. Okay, I didn't want to say something I was wrong about.
Can I ask a quick question related to that expenditure? Okay. So, well, two parts. Who's going to convey the changes to Kim? Okay. And then part 2, is there a vendor that would be typically utilized? And then is there?
Yes, we actually have that all set up from when Eric was here.
Oh,
So
okay.
we were ready to go, we just never had anything to produce.
Okay,
So it's a North Kansas City business, and that'll
Okay.
be all, and we'll go through the city to order.
great. Thanks.
So it sounds like one place we want to spend money is on our North Kansas City United decals. Other things that came up in our work meeting were banners for community events, either T-shirts or name tags for community events. We're not doing prizes for decal design, a quarterly newsletter, and potentially a neighborhood cleanup. Other than the decals, are there any other things we want to use our budget towards this year?
I have actually just a clarifying question. What I had understood you guys to say before is that you would like to hire someone to review your strategic plan, which we approved in this meeting. Is that still something that you want to do, or do you feel as though your strategic plan does not need revision?
I personally think if we're going to spend any amount of money on the strategic plan, it should be with actionable items. So like we have the plan, we've all agreed on the plan. If there's going to be things like data gathering or anywhere else where we are going to need to put money, we should probably focus it there.
Do you have something? I have maybe just a couple of observations. Yes, I think we need help with our strategic plan, and I think it's going to be more than $2,000. So let's say we spend $1,000 on these things. It might be a down payment on some help too, but we're going to have to ask for some additional budget for the next fiscal year.
So we already have, it has not been approved, but we do already have funds for the next year that exceed that amount. In talking with Kim about this item, she suggested that we do an RFP if that's what we were going to do, and that process takes time.
Okay.
So I believe we could get the process started, and we can follow through with the fiscal year, the next fiscal year's funds.
So at the last meeting, we also brainstormed on next fiscal year budget items. And I think that we captured that list because we weren't sure. We knew we wanted to get our budget request in before the budget got finalized. Can you tell us how much has been earmarked, even though it's not approved
It's not
yet?
approved, but it's written in as $10,000 at the moment.
Okay. And the RFP process would be to go out for bid for some kind of a consultant to help us through the strategic planning process. Okay, yeah, thanks.
So with that knowledge, are there any other like smaller items that we want to add to this year's budget, knowing that next year we have a little more money to be flexible with?
I love the name tag idea for committee, and maybe even like a tablecloth with the printed logo. If we're going to be like at events in the city and things like that, that would be my thought.
I'm going to go ahead and call those branding items, including name tags, potentially shirts, tablecloths, or sign. Any others for the 21 budget? Great. Moving on to our 22 budget. Ideas we came up with in the work session, things we could potentially use our budget for. Data collection. I'm going to delete North Kansas City United because we just discussed that. The idea of a Citizens Leadership Academy, warming stations for the winter, any marketing needs, an annual festival that we mentioned in our strategic plan, and translation services. Any other ideas or things we want to do for sure?
I would just say that the city is working through ideas for a warming station. If that were to be something that the city does, that wouldn't be an area where we would spend our funds. I think they would assume that responsibility.
Also, the North Kansas City Citizens Academy, Kim sent us an email this afternoon stating that it has been a project she has been working on for over a year. It is already in the city budget, so you don't need to add that to yours.
We did talk a little bit about translation services last time being something that would be a city operation expense and not necessarily a committee expense. But I'm not sure that that was, really fully fleshed out. I think the city needs to have a plan first. And maybe that's something we can help with. And if there's, maybe a little bit of funding to help identify, there's vendors that can help the city provide language services. Last month, Lisa, I shared about an experience that I had with the police and a gentleman who was he wasn't under arrest, but he was in our neighborhood. He didn't speak English, and so it was that process that he really, had I not been there to interpret for him, he would have not been communicated with effectively and potentially at risk for health issues or incarceration. So it revealed, I think, that, and when I asked the 6 police officers that showed up, what's their normal process for handling cases where people who are being stopped or questioned don't speak English, they didn't have a strategy. They didn't have any resources or phone numbers or people on call or even, language line on their phones. So a plan might be something we can really contribute to and help the city think about the operational expenses that might come with that.
So I'm not sure, I know you were going to file a process complaint through the police department. I was going to let that process run its course, but they do have translation services. I don't know where the breakdown came with that situation. but they do subscribe to services. And we have 2 Hispanic police officers on the force, so.
Okay.
I'm not sure where the breakdown was, so we'll let them
Okay.
respond to that.
Okay.
Are
So-
those, go ahead.
So that was the one element that I didn't get done from last meeting to this meeting, was to finish that complaint. I started kind of typing it up and getting it ready. So I will be sure to submit that so they can respond.
And I have to apologize because I wasn't here at your work session, and since it was a work session, it wasn't on YouTube, so I couldn't go back and look at it, so, thank you, Casey.
Great. So it sounds like ideas that we want to use our 22 budget for are a strategic plan consultant with possibility of an RFP, data collection, again, marketing, and then planning our first equity and inclusion annual festival. Any other things we should add to this list?
I just feel the need to clarify that having 2 Hispanic officers on the force does not at all equate to either of them being bilingual and able to translate.
I was just gonna ask a question about an RFP for someone to help us with our strategic plan. If we do that, would that person simply meet with like a couple, like the strategic plan team, and then you guys would bring back the recommendations, I guess, to a meeting? Is that kind of how that process would work, just with how our meetings work and the rules for meeting outside of council, time, city time?
I think we would be able to meet as an entire group. I can double check that with Kim, but I know when we work on strategic plan, it's with the whole group. So let me check on that, and that's something I can email out to you guys, okay?
Yeah, that's, and what I was kind of getting at there is maybe before, and obviously the RFP process will take a little bit, but before that, we could all meet about it and just talk, more casually about these goals and maybe what the actual strategies are to accomplish them. Because I think that's where we go next with that, and that's really hard to do in this setting. And in my opinion, it just takes a long time to hash out, especially with all the ideas we have. So, but that's where I see the next steps with the strategic plan, is looking at those ideas and just fleshing them out a little more. Yeah, and I think we are definitely capable of that without necessarily someone telling us that, but we might get to a point where we need someone who can help with the strategy. But that's my 2 cents on that.
Go
I have-
go ahead.
I have a comment about the annual, like the cultural festival. The city has a tourism budget also, correct? Would we be responsible for that entirely, or could we possibly tap into other budgets or other funding from the city to help and assist with that? Because that's a big, that's going to cost a lot of money to put on a festival.
So how does Snake Saturday usually break down budget-wise? I know it's like a mixture of things, correct? Like the city puts some in, and then the hospital, I believe. There's funding comes from multiple places for Snake Saturday, correct? Would it work something like that?
Yeah, we'd have to get further clarification from Kim on how the budget's laid out for those activities.
I also think as we walk through better planning with looking at the strategic plan and what we want to focus on first, that will help dictate some of our budget too, without having to decide right now what next year's budget will be. It's just hard to know as we decide, yes, these are the top 3 things we're going to focus on right now. So definitely leaving a lot of that open-ended, I think, would be helpful going into the next year.
So it sounds like our biggest budget priority for next year will be a strategic plan consultant. And then from there, we'll use our strategic plan to allocate how we want to spend those funds. Great. Moving on to a letter review letter request to North Kansas City PD. Gabby, do you want to give us a little context on that? I know not everyone was here last week.
Sure. So it was discussed during the work session. I think maybe as we were trying to kind of pound out the the details on the strategic plan draft, that, that there hadn't been any formal follow-up with the police chief regarding the community forum and kind of identifying some next steps, whether it was, getting some dates on the calendar and whatever. It felt like there was like a yes, we're going to do that. It was discussed in city council. That's why that XXX is in the letter, because somebody was going to send me the actual resolution, or there was, I can't remember, ordinance, or there was, no, I don't know. Is it a resolution?
It was a resolution.
Great. And so I didn't have that number, but it was just a kind of a gentle reminder to Chief that this commitment had been made and that we, want to kind of see that happen over the next year. And so it was just an initial draft for the group to review, to consider sending to the chief, and to willingly volunteer to coordinate and collaborate with the staff that he would identify, and we can help support the organization of that forum, so it doesn't fall all to him. So that's a little bit of the context for those that weren't here.
Thanks, Gabby. If everyone takes a minute to review the letter and then look for anything they'd want to add or any pushes they have for the content that's already there.
Would you like me to read it out loud for people that might be watching?
That would be fantastic. Thanks.
Okay. Dear Police Chief Freeman, or actually, Gabby, you wrote it. You want to read it? I'll listen.
So I don't have my glasses with me. My glasses are in the shop,
And I'm reading.
And I don't have a
I've
computer.
got my first pair of progressives, so I'm like really ready for this.
They're magical.
Dear Police Chief Freeman, on behalf of the city's Equity and Inclusion Committee, I am writing to request formal follow-up regarding the routine community forums to be held with the police leadership, which was approved by City Council resolution on fill in the date. While no frequency was discussed, we feel as though it's critical to continue to cultivate community trust by establishing several future dates so that busy community members can anticipate scheduling and plan to attend. Preliminarily, we believe that meeting quarterly with community would be sufficient, with the exception that if something pressing or urgent comes up, that a meeting could be scheduled ad hoc. Might you be able to identify a staff member on your team that we could work with to solidify these dates and times? Please consider an October, November, and then again after the first of the year. Please do not hesitate to reach out to one of our committee members at eic@nkc.org. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. So the only thing I want to bring up for discussion is there are already community events on the books for the police department, like the Coffee with a Cop, which I apologize to the chief that I dropped the ball on that, and I did not make you guys aware. That's part of my role as the liaison, is to make sure that you are aware of those upcoming events. So I think we can also take those items into consideration when we're talking about the number of times that they're meeting with the public. And I can reach out and make sure that I have the future dates on that.
Yeah, that was my only question. So that is something that's scheduled to be on some sort of schedule, I guess.
Yes, it is. And I know that they put it out. I am not connected on Facebook or Twitter or anything. I know it was pushed out. I was looking at the wrong calendar. We have 2 calendars on our website. So for anybody that's like me and is using the website, there are 2 calendars. So I missed it. And I missed alerting everyone, and that is my responsibility, so I apologize. But I'll make sure I get those future dates, because I think we can count those as community contact. They're events that they planned, but it's still for them to, meet and greet with the community.
Go ahead.
I appreciate those events, and I think they're important, but I also think having communication that is dedicated to discussing where we can do better and potentially where we're falling short is important, versus just being in the community, which is also very much so appreciated as far as community policing. But I do think that as far as having like the community forums, there needs to be specific dates that are annual. It could be 2, or just something that we have planned. That is an annual forum where the community can come and ask questions. I know somebody has brought up redundancy. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Like, I know that was kind of voiced, I don't remember who voiced that concern. It might have been Chief Freeman himself. I do not recall that if we have these forums 2 times a year or multiple times, that we might just hit this point where we're asking the same questions over and over again. And I feel like if we are hitting that point, it's probably because nothing's been resolved, and maybe we should be asking those questions repeatedly.
I would just also add that coffee with a cop is not coffee with leadership. So while I agree that those events should be recognized as important, valuable, trust-building elements, my guess is that somebody draws the short straw and has to go do the coffee with a cop, but the leadership is accountable. And that's the piece that I think we were discussing, that people have real concerns that need to be heard by leadership who are empowered to make changes. And that's not your frontline cop, beat cop, you know, like, and maybe I don't know the system or structure well enough, but my guess is that cop might hear feedback, but is he or she empowered to make systemic change? Probably not.
Well, I know Chief Freeman was at the last one. I can check with him to see if he's at all of them, but it is a pretty small operation, and I think he does attend most of these community events that are already pre-planned.
I do agree. I think we need specific forums like we had last summer, where it's the hard questions are being asked versus a casual conversation. A lot of kids are going to, the event with Coffee with a Cop. That's not the time and the place, in my opinion, to be asking difficult questions of people when they're really trying to get to know the community members. I like the idea of having them at least a couple times a year.
So if I can reword that, one is about community engagement and getting to know the community that they serve, and the other is the community getting to know the department that serves them. So asking the difficult questions.
Yep, I was just saying to meet the 4 times a year, I think it could be both. One time it could be the communication piece where you're getting to the more difficult questions that you're not going to have when, the kids are there to see the cop cars and meet the police officers. I just think the 4 times don't necessarily all 4 need to be the forum that you're talking about. We can count all of these pieces as communication and community involvement.
So I'll agree, but I just don't want us to get to a point where potentially they do Coffee with a Cop 4 times a year and we say, hey, cool, we met the quota. I think these specific forums need to have space. They need to have their own dedicated scheduled time. And there should at the very least be 2 of them a year.
Definitely. And I think keeping that line in here that, with the exception that if something pressing or urgent comes up, that the expectation is that we want them to come back together and come back to the table and have those discussions again when we need to. So,
if I recall, so I think the 4, which we don't have to do this, but I think I don't remember where that came from exactly, but I think it was 2 community forums followed by potentially what we did, which was sitting down with him and asking questions. So one is the community asking questions, and the other is us following up to see if anything has changed, if there's been any progress on anything that was discussed with the community. So I think that was where the 4 came from. So 2 community forums, like what happened at Mackin, and then 2 follow-up meetings at some point when it's convenient for them with the Equity and Inclusion Committee to discuss the forum, essentially. Oh, and for the record, the resolution was, I emailed it to everybody right now, but it was July 7th of 2020, and it was resolution number 20-042. And it's a resolution in support of an ongoing conversation between the community and the city on matters of race, inclusion, and policing. There's a lot of other stuff, but it did pass, I believe. I can't remember if it was unanimous or not, but it was pretty close.
So it sounds like one change we need to make is including the resolution number and date. Are there any other additions or changes we want to make to this letter?
I would like to recommend something to my own letter, which is that I feel like when I gave the context, there was something there that I feel needs to be included in the letter, which is we look forward and stand ready to collaborate with you on this, that I don't want him to feel singled out or shamed in any way. So I want to be perceived as a partner in it and collaborator, and not like shame on you for, whatever. So I want to see if we can capture that kind of verbiage or feel in the letter, that we'll work together to plan these and to execute them. It's not going to just fall to his staff that we can help with marketing and social media and things like that to get community present. So.
Okay, I just went ahead and put it in a Word document so we could do this while we're talking. Can you go ahead and read the resolution number and the date for me, please?
Resolution 20-042, and it was July 7th, 2020.
Okay,
I think it's important to also just include the topic, which was on matters related to race, inclusion, and policing.
It was very specific, and there is actually quite a bit involved as to why it came about, but yes. And it just said, a resolution in support of an ongoing conversation between the community and the city on matters of race, inclusion, and policing.
okay, a resolution in support of an ongoing, that's where I left off.
And I mean, it might actually be pertinent to read all of this, but it does end with, now therefore be it resolved by the city council of the city of North Kansas City, Missouri, to fight systemic and individual racism, to celebrate our diversity, to support the right to peaceful protest, and to respect the humanity and dignity of every individual. It was a very specific resolution.
So I'm happy to take another stab at it, Lisa, and send it back to the group.
Okay.
Does the group feel like we need to include some of the elements from the actual resolution as to the intent?
I think so, because I think it's sort of it's the follow through. It was stated by the city that we're going to do this, and I think this is the follow through. So we just want to make sure that it happens.
Are you guys okay with that? I can go redraft and send it out? Okay.
I'll include that as, I'm just capturing notes as we go through, but.
Yeah, I think referencing that resolution is really important. And I'm glad that was read during this, just because I think it reminds everyone one of the reasons this committee was created, but also just that it reiterates why those conversations are important. So yeah, I think like in pursuant of, or just reiterating that number is always good to keep it on the forefront. The resolution number, I mean.
Gabby, I just sent that resolution number and date to your email.
Are we ready to move on to our next item?
Can I just ask one question of the city? So I know we focused on the police department having translation services, and you said they do. Does the city as well? Like if somebody walked in and had questions for somebody, is there some way that they would be able to get their views and opinions across? Is there somebody here, or would you guys direct them to somebody? Do you know? Like essentially, yeah, if somebody walked into the court office, or I mean, to the city, or tried to email Kim and wasn't a primary English speaker, does the city have a service that translates, or somebody who can?
I am not sure if courts does, because I know they deal with that, often. I'd have to check on that. And as a city, we don't. We would just use our tools that we have on our phones.
Okay, because I do know, I think the courts are legally required to translate all information into whatever language is necessary.
Casey, I just want to offer that I'm happy to help with that if the city needs some help. That's my past life is in language access planning, so I'm happy to help.
Our next agenda item is discuss with Lisa the process for city administrator and what our role can be in it. I believe that was like the hiring process, for more context, and draft potential ideas for diversity questions in the interview process. I don't remember who brought this up in our work session. Does anyone want to give context on that?
Yeah, that was me. Just because I knew that the posting had gone out and the search firm had been identified and candidates were starting to apply, that was there an opportunity really just for us to participate in the hiring process to kind of gauge applicants' comfort level with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and or their focus or priorities. And at the very least, if the process is already kind of too far down the road, can we help the other interviewers prepare for some diversity questions that they could then make sure to ask the candidates?
Okay. So this is perfect timing, actually, because the mayor and Kim are going to be meeting with Art Davis in 2 weeks, I believe, and they are talking about how to bring the community into the hiring process, which would include us as well. So in thinking about this matter, how I could see exactly what you said be helpful, Gabby, is to come up with 1 or 2 questions that we think are important for equity and inclusion and suggest that they be added to or combined with some of the questions that they already have. They do have a number of applicants, and I'm sure they'll whittle that down first, but it is in their forethought about how to bring the community in, and I think coming up with questions that we think really pinpoint equity and inclusion and giving those as suggestions to the city would be a great idea.
So I'm happy to pull some questions together. So there is, the Kansas Department of Administration has actually a very cool tool that you can use that will allow you to kind of by subject matter pull legal questions together for interviewing candidates. And I know that there's a diversity and inclusion category of about probably 20 question set, and I can just cut that and we could maybe circulate it and vote on the top 3 or people weigh in on. I don't know, do you know the time frame? Do we?
So yeah, that's what I was just thinking through. That puts us at another month. Because even if we had a work session, you really don't vote on things like that. I don't think this is something that we would need to vote on, though, necessarily. I think this is something that that we could have a few people work on together to get those to the city earlier. It might be something, if they're meeting in a couple weeks to see how to bring the community together, it might be good to have those, like what we think, a couple of really good questions that hit the nail on the head, have those ready for them to discuss.
Could I suggest that when we're doing committee updates, we come up with a group of a couple people who want to do that, so we don't have to use the meeting of like 3 or more. Any other discussion on this topic? Great. So we're on to agenda item number 8, update time limits and guidelines to meetings. This was brought up by Brandy in our work session as well. Knowing that sometimes our meetings go a little bit longer, we wanted to try to set clearer time limits on discussion items. Any thoughts on that?
I think now is a good time for Lisa's proposal about the end.
I do have a proposal. So in talking through some things that that come up when you're discussing other things, I thought the meeting agenda format that we adopted, if we could put in committee member comments at the end. And the reason why I think that would be important is because sometimes something comes up and you try to cram it in to fit in something that's on the agenda. When it's not a voting item, it's an idea, it's something you want to talk about openly, and we could maybe address that in committee member comments at the end.
I do like the idea of timing out the agenda. That was one of the recommendations from Brandy, like 10 minutes on this and 10 minutes on that. Because I do think that helps keep us accountable to each other. But I do also like having, because that allows us to say, hang on to that thought. We've got time at 8:05 or whatever, like I think that will allow for streamlined. And Brandy taught us a lot about Robert's rules last month. So I think some of it's about our drivers that help us stay on track.
Great, so I'll update next month's agenda to include community member comments at the end with announcements. And I have,
So it would be committee member, not
Yep.
community, okay.
yep, I wrote that down, but I said it wrong. It's been a long day. And then the other thing that I did is I gave us like rough timestamps and sent those out in an email, and we've been sticking pretty close to them, so I'm very proud of us. We're doing great. Next up is agenda number 9, committee updates. We've finished, unless there are other North Kansas City United updates, then voting. We're moving on from that for people of North Kansas City.
Can I just ask a quick question about NKC United? Does this intend to be a larger project, or is it, because we kind of assured the community that it was not just about decals and stickers, so do we intend to put some time and work into figuring out exactly the purpose of this project and what we intend to do with it?
I think that kind of goes back into the strategic plan and timing some of that out and holding ourselves accountable to what we want it to look like for the community. We could spin our wheels, I think, if we tried to like focus on all these things all at the same time. So the strategic, getting someone to help us with the timing and who's working on what will be really helpful. But I think the short answer to that is yes.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure that we kind of had that in mind in the future.
But the decals also come along with the pledge, which is something that was planned out and I think is important. So I wouldn't say it would be just decals. Like, I think that's the first step, was that pledge that you wrote.
Is there a committee? It sounds like maybe there's a committee with 2 or 3 people that conceptualized it and then.
So actually, in this case, I think it was April who had pulled the idea from another city, but I don't know if any of us actually ever. So this, to be fair, we tried to get this in really quickly during that city council meeting because we wanted approval to continue to work on it.
Yeah.
But we've never actually worked on it. We just we came up with like the basic concepts, but like, is there more to it? Are we collaborating with these businesses in some way to ensure like things like that? And it could even be things like when we do eventually have our cultural festival or something, like these businesses who have, already taken the pledge or have the thing, like maybe they have different events at their places or something, but just like in general that we haven't, I don't think, had anybody work on it in any small group in any way.
Okay.
Perhaps we should then. I mean, that could really get started before we go through like the strategic planning piece of it. If like April wants to still be engaged in that process, a couple other people could help her figure out what next steps are.
I'll definitely help with that. I don't know. If I'll ask April if she still wants to as well. I'll put her down, just assuming she does.
And we can have one more person working on NKC United, if it's April, Jess, and anyone else.
I'll volunteer for that.
All right, jumping down to people of North Kansas City, any updates there?
Yes. I have a PowerPoint that I just sent to you. One of the things that we wanted to do is highlight some of the positions that are open. I think that's a great service that we could have on our site. So I've been talking to Daniel about how we could have that show on our website, a bulletin of the positions that are open. The idea, and this is just an idea, so you can do what you will with it. have some sort of message, because one of our big purposes is to reach out to the community and then start seeing more diversity within our government. So an idea of something to go along with the openings is, however you would want to word it, but something about if you don't see yourself reflected in government, then maybe you should apply for one of these positions. So the one that the mayor would like us to start with, and I have a PowerPoint for this. I spoke with Sarah on the phone leading up to this. I wanted it to be concise and give all the information you need in a little bit of time. So I wrote it in question format. I meant to have it up on the boards, but I guess I forgot to send it to Steven. Sorry, guys. So if you have your computer, it's there. I can read through it for anybody who's listening at home. It has the Planning Commission of North Kansas City. I set it up in question format, questions that we think people might want to know. Was that outside or in here?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the purpose of the Planning Commission? So there is a vacancy right now. There are two main purposes for the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission acts on planning application. They approve plans that are submitted, and they make recommendations to the city. They advise on long-term planning for the city. What prerequisite skills do I need? You do not need a background in planning to serve on the Planning Commission. Training will be provided by staff. Now, Sarah was very clear that in the past year and a half, that hasn't really happened very much because they've been virtual. But now that they're coming back into in person, they're going to do more training. So in virtual world, if they didn't have any plans to actually vote on, they didn't meet. But in real world, without COVID, then they had their once a month meetings, and they also did trainings and other things to get the information on how they can do a good job as being the Planning Commission. It says that we are looking for citizens that love North Kansas City and want to participate in planning its future. What is the time commitment when joining the Planning Commission? So this is obviously important to a lot of people, what you're signing on for. The Planning Commission is a 4-year term. Members meet once a month on the first Thursday of the month. Who can apply? Any North Kansas City resident. Applications, this will have to be changed when we get a new website, but can be found at nkc.org. You go to government and then boards and commissions, and then I just have a slide that actually shows that application, just so people are like, okay, yes, this is what I need. And then I was going to possibly put a slide at the end. We'd have to be able to change it as your liaison changes, but just with my contact information. So if you read this, you're interested, but you're still not sure if you want to apply, I could put you in touch with somebody who is currently on the board or commission, and I could also get you in touch with the right staff person that would be assigned to that board or commission.
Can I just make a request maybe for the addition of maybe one bullet?
Yeah.
Which is that the very first, thank you so much. The first slide that describes what is the purpose of the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
To me, planning seems very vague for the average Joe community member. Are we talking about the scope of what we're planning for? Logistics, infrastructure, disaster,
Okay.
fire, give some examples of what they plan for. Because I'm still confused about why the roads group is separate from the planning committee. Shouldn't that be part
I
of
can tell you that
Okay.
because I do know that answer.
Okay.
So the state of Missouri, you have to have a roads district to receive the special money
Okay.
from the state of Missouri. So it has to happen that way.
Okay.
The road district here exceeds our borders by a bit, but it's mostly in North Kansas City. So they are elected. They're separate than the planning commission or anything that's here. And they've got 3 members and then the lawyer, and that's why it's a separate thing. It's a separate pot of money. Did I explain that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But does one inform the other? So that's my beef, is that it doesn't feel like they inform each other. Sorry, I'm
So-
going to be real.
From my understanding, they are their own political subdivision. So I don't know how much they work together with the planning commission, but it's not like the planning commission can compel them to do things, from my understanding.
That is true. And then for a little bit of history, because I've been asking a lot of questions, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm like laying down on the table. I have asked a lot of questions because it does seem like something that the city would need to work with the road district for forward progress so that you're not just ripping out the other person's work, let's say. So in the past, there has been more collaboration of them just saying, hey, these are the projects we're looking at this year, like that. They're not obligated to collaborate with us, but it has happened in the past. And I know that our current mayor is really working hard to kind of build those bridges and bring those relationships back. Again, it's not required, but it would be helpful.
Who voted them in, or they're appointed?
No, they're voted in, and we did vote them in because the last person that ran unopposed. And it may have been like that since forever.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
so there's no other city official that's voted in that doesn't have to collaborate. So I guess it feels very shady to me that this transactions around specifically this bundle of dollars that affects this quadrant is being determined and in a different city and kind of in a closet, like in isolation without collaboration. And I feel like I wish I was free tomorrow at 3, but I'm not. But it's not even being broadcast, right? I mean, we don't get away with that.
Why are they exempt? Yeah.
That is correct. And there is not a rule that the meeting has to take place within the district. So like I said, the district exceeds the borders of North Kansas City. Where the meeting is being held is not within the road district, but there is no rule about that. I will say that Crystal Doss, who is amazing and fabulous, has said that she will make sure if anybody would like to write a letter, that we can go through the city to get that distributed to the members. And then I actually will be going to the meeting. I already have a letter from one citizen, so you could give it to me as well. And I could bring those. There's really not public comments that I'm aware of. I do not believe there are public comments. And I'm not going to make public comments. I just want to start going and pay attention and learn more about how it works. But I will make sure that your letters make it, or we can send it to Crystal as well.
Okay. And can you help me know, like, if I wanted to study more or understand why sunshine laws don't apply to them, where would I look? Like, is it a Missouri statute?
I wanted to back up because I thought of something that I didn't say. There is one requirement, which is that these meetings are open to the public. So, it has moved, and it's at a weird daytime time, but.
In a very small conference room.
That I have been told opens up to a larger room. In an area without a mask mandate. There's all the things, but they are open to the public. So I just want you to know that it's my goal moving forward, and we can go through the committee or to anybody who's interested. I'm taking off work to go. I'm committed to learning more about it because this is about all that I know about it so far. And I'd be happy to talk to you after I go to the meeting.
So I was going to say, as far as the sunshine law, like, it's not required that we record meetings. We just do that because we can, correct? And then, so for them, all they have to do is the same as our work sessions aren't recorded.
The sunshine law just means that this meeting is open. People could come, they could be here. We're broadcasting it. It doesn't have to be broadcast.
Okay.
And also, there's more information online about it, but, you could request communication to make sure everything's on the up and up. But
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. And I don't want to seem like that kind of a troublemaker, but it just didn't feel quite right, didn't feel quite above board. And so if we don't say something, I really appreciate you making the time to go tomorrow to do that additional investigation. And I think that's the essence of of the things that we're trying to look at is to make sure that decisions that impact our community aren't made in a vacuum, that they're made with input. So I appreciate you sharing all of that, and I don't want you to think that this is toward you. It's toward that system that I feel is outdated and broken.
And it's a system that I honestly, that's why I've made a commitment to make sure I go to the meetings, because I do need to learn more about it. And I'll share that with you as I learn.
So may I ask, when are those seats up? So I know one just happened. What is their term? Is it?
I believe there'll be one seat up in April, every April election.
Okay.
Am I correct? I think that's correct. I believe that to be true, but I'll email you if I'm wrong.
Any updates for our EIC newsletter or things we want to include potentially in the North Kansas City quarterly newsletter?
So real quick, that was Lisa's thing on People of North Kansas City. The other thing on People of North Kansas City, which we can't really, I don't know if we can get any input on it tonight, is we actually need the city's input on whether or not, it originally started in a format that was on Instagram. And we had discussed that we might want to go back to that format, but then we were also told that we could not have a EIC-specific Facebook page, and while they are two separate things, and I think there is the ability, because I think it had something to do with commenting and like not wanting to have to moderate it too heavily, like we could still post in the same format and shut off commenting. So basically, I think what we needed was some guidance from the city on whether or not that is a reality that we can go back to that format now that it is somewhat city-led and not just like an independent initiative.
I know specifically with the Facebook issue, even though you can turn off comments, it's just in other cities, in other areas, has had a lot of lawsuits that follow that. The city really wouldn't have the staff to monitor online activity in a format where the city could be tagged in messages or photos that were not appropriate or not condoned by the city. So I am not online savvy, as I previously have told you. So I don't really know how Instagram works as far as if people can tag you on other things. But that was the issue before. They wouldn't want the city tagged on a photo, a message, anything that would not, that they would not have approved.
So if we do not, or if we are not allowed to have this, does this mean we need to remove all of the previous, essentially remove the account, even though, because it started as like an independent initiative and now it has become something
I
that
don't
is
think
city-run?
it's an equity and inclusion account, though. I think you can leave it
Okay.
how it is, yeah. Yeah, but what I hear you saying is, let's ask Kim if it would be appropriate for us to do, or are we able to do something on Instagram, correct?
Essentially just to continue that format. So it was already started, we already have a number of followers from the city. So people who live in the city is what I was saying. So yes, so essentially just to continue, because there were interviews that weren't published, that could be published already, but not necessarily if we can't, because there's something that prevents us from doing so because it is a social media platform.
Okay, I will run that by her.
Any others for People of North Kansas City? Great.
I think there was a note about having our team members complete one. I didn't know if it needed a bear discussion, but I was on board with that. Thought it was a good idea to get started, and so yeah.
I think there was a few at the work session that volunteered. Brandy, maybe?
So Brandy volunteered and we haven't
Okay.
pinned down a time, but whenever, if anybody would like to do an interview and has some times, you guys can just like shoot the days that work for you and we can make it work.
Then let's plan on all doing that soon. EIC newsletter or potentially including something in the North Kansas City quarterly newsletter. Did we have an official group for that? Or is that just a group we want to start and I made a bad note? Great. Does anyone want to be a part of the newsletter and or included in the quarterly newsletter group?
I'll be a part of that group.
I can also be a part of that group. I think though, anything that we would publish, we would all like agree on and contribute to, so.
One comment, Kim needs the information to her by the close of business on Wednesday, August 25th. So it's a quick turnaround for that.
So that's to be included in the upcoming newsletter?
Correct.
Okay.
What was
Oh.
discussed in the work session related to that?
Just that we wanted to do it.
So I think in the work session, we discussed, so we threw out the topic of a newsletter. And then it was said that maybe we don't need to have our own newsletter that we produce and print and get out to the community, but instead we just hop on with the neighborhood one a couple times a year. I don't remember, I don't think we decided yet quarterly, which would then be a little easier and it would get to everybody. But I think that was the majority of what we discussed. The plan, we don't really have one for, but I mean, we could just start with like an introductory, something that explains who we are again.
I was gonna say, we have the initial one, but I mean, could potentially like summarize what we've been working on. or
The
what
strategic
was-
plan
yeah.
and things like that. So
Things
just
we
kind of
can
updating,
I
yeah.
like that. So I'm happy to be on that, I guess, also.
Yeah, the only context we had for it was we were talking, would we need to include like paper and mailing budget in a budget for this year? So that's really all we had. All right, guys, we're on number 10, announcements.
Tara, would you email me the original one? So that we can like, if we're turning it around on the 25th, we should probably get on that.
It's not really an announcement, but it's going back to an item that we didn't nail down, which is the question set for the hiring. Is there anybody, I'm happy to pull that question set if somebody else wanted to look at them and highlight or tease out the top 5.
I'd like to see them, yeah.
I'd love to work with you on that.
Should I email everybody or just, I know we're not supposed to have the back and forth and.
Could you just email it to us all and we don't have to discuss it? And then if you guys want to work in your own group on it, and then,
You can email it to everyone. I would just blind copy everybody so you don't have a reply all situation.
Okay. Okay, so email diversity questions. Got it.
And then Gabby, when you send that out, I'll respond and we
Okay.
can work together.
Great.
So it's Gabby and Jess and Bess, is that correct?
no, I'm not in, I just wanted to see them. They can work in their group.
I'll work with you too.
Sorry, guys. I just agreed that we all like 2 different things.
I'll join you guys.
Any other announcements? Well, then it is 8:20 and we will call this meeting over.